Hey everyone, Tim Higgins here. So I'm going to do a quick little series. Um, I've been tasked to do a POC with a product called Test Data Manager, and I have other videos for that. So if you want to know how it works, just find those videos. But the truth is, when you think of Test Data Manager, its job is to basically manage test data, right? But it is a database tool. And when you think about databases for demos, one of my favorite is the AdventureWorks because it's such a large database. It has a lot of stuff with it. So you can find that, download it, and just attach it because that's what I'm going to be demonstrating here. The one thing I can't find is a UI for it. So even though Test Data Manager really is for managing test data, you kind of want a UI to see your results, okay? So what I'm going to do is build a quick web page for one. Like I said, it's very hard to find one, so we're just going to build one. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to demonstrate it since there is no UI out there that's easily usable for the AdventureWorks bike shop. So with saying that, you want to download the latest, well, let's put a scope here if you want to. So number one, the scope is a UI for AdventureWorks bike app, bike database, because it's based on bicycles, right? And then number two, that's for testing with TDM. This will be just forgive a POC. Well, it's not really a POC, it's more of a demo. And then number three, what we need to do is we're going to use Entity Framework Core. That's the latest version of Entity Framework. And we're just going to do it really quick. So with that, we're going to have our data layer. Okay. Our data layer, like I said, will be Entity Framework. And then we're going to have our, from there, I'm just thinking, we definitely need the UI, but the UI could be many things, right? Angular JS, just JavaScript, or what we're really gonna, I'm just gonna stick and keep it simple. We're gonna create maybe an ASP, and I'm thinking, or maybe just HTML. We'll deal with that when we get to it, but I definitely want to be pulling from JavaScript using APIs. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of frameworks out there. There's a lot of quick little move forward type frameworks that we could be using, but at the same time, I'm just gonna do this from scratch, and we're gonna make it work from there. So that tells me I need an API layer. Okay, so the API, and then we'd say data layer, we need a repository. Okay, repository. Okay, so this is our main layers right here. So we need 4 layers at least as a minimum. And what we're going to do, if you look at the bike shop, I really like it because the bike shop, and we'll probably talk more about this once I get into using the code. Sorry, I just want to close all that. So if you look at the bike shop, there's a lot of great tables involved. And that's why I like it, right? So if you look at product, you have a list of your bicycles. And there's a lot of like integrations between all these, which makes it a very good demo for TDM. But if you're going to hear, there's also some store procedures. I'm not a big fan of the store procedures because they're kind of basic. So like if I looked at get employee managers and we just execute this, this number is looking for this business ID. That's your normal ID. Here's this product, but in the people, it's just your primary key. So I'm just gonna throw one out there. Doesn't matter which one. And that's all I get back, right? So that's not really useful for me for this. Now, maybe later, but what I really like the most is the views. There's a lot of great views. And hopefully you all know what a view is, but it's basically just a select statement, a very large select statement. But let's say if I want to see my list of products and descriptions, right? So I can get that there. Now, if you actually want to see the view, of course, you just do design, and it shows you the relationships. But now, the entity framework, as of now, I don't think it supports views, but this already created our select statement, so we could use this. So we'll get to that when we get to it, okay? So for now, let's just get started. First thing we've got to do is create a project. What I like to do is I start off with creating a blank solution to put everything in. Okay, so we'll say new project. Let's go, if you go under other types, you'll have solutions. and we're going to stick this under. Now, long time ago, years ago, we did a product called Bike Shop, and I'll probably say that name by accident a couple of times, but this is kind of what I'm thinking is this kind of be a Bike Shop 2.0. I like to keep everything under a folder called source, and we'll call this Bike Shop 2. It's very bad practice to have numbers in your names, so we'll call it Bike Shop with database. How's that? And then this, we'll just call it Bike Shop. Okay, it might get kind of confusing because I have other bike shops like in TFS and stuff. So when I upgrade this, maybe we'll call it Bike Shop Demo. There we go, because that's really what it's going to be at the end of the day. All right. So, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what's waiting on. So the first thing I need is a data layer. So I like to start with a solution folder. I like to keep everything separate, right? So you have this concept of separation of concerns. So I like to visually keep it separated also. Why didn't you add that? Oh, you know what? There's one very important thing. I don't think I need it here, but we need our project to be a certain version to use Entity Framework. Yeah, this doesn't matter because it's blank. All right, but this one will. So let's go ahead and rename this. We can call this Bike Shop .dal for data access layer. Okay, I like to have everything based upon my access layers, and then oops, wow, I don't care about that. I just went to scope, so we say new project. We need this one to be. I don't like how I did that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is create a simple project. Excuse me. My default language is C++, but in this case we're going to do a C#. So C# may be your default language, but right now we're just going to do this one. For this, we only need a DLL, so we're just going to do a basic class library. There we go. So we'll do, make sure it has the .NET framework. That's fine. I don't think it really cares. So we have our Bike Shop database. We want to call this one DAL because we're going to put it in its own folder. You have to make sure you're at least, I think it's 4.6 or 4.7 to get the Entity Framework core. We'll just start with there. Bike Shop.dal. Keep in mind, this is not really a training video for say to teach you C# or how to program. You're just watching me throw together an app real quick, and hopefully you can use this in the future to build your own apps real fast. Okay, so here's our first class, and we're going to delete it because I don't really need it. The cool thing about Entity Framework, we're going to get to this in a few minutes. Whenever I break down my data access layer, I do a couple of things. Number one, I want to make sure my data models are separate from my other code, and you'll see that. I also want to make sure my repository is separate as well. So that way it helps keeps, I can't talk and spell, repository. And if you know me anyway, I really stink at spelling. So that's my two separations. We're going to cheat a little bit because we have to add some stuff. And I'm going to talk about these websites too, but if you Google Entity Framework, you get a lot of crap. But the one thing that is interesting is this docs.microsoft.com. What we want is the NuGet packages. So we want this one. So let's go open up our NuGet console. Okay. What I'm doing? Oh, console. I'm sorry. All right, so that would give us our Entity Framework. And then, while that's downloading, we also, if you get an error, make sure your version is correct. Like I said, it is picky about the .NET version you use. So the other one we want is also, sorry, I dragged in my other monitor while it's installing. The other one we want is the tools, which is here. No, I'm sorry, we want the Entity Framework. It's the same thing though, right? You just grab, just install package. There we go. This is what we want. And then we're pretty much done with this page. But like I said, this is a pretty good page. I'm not sure what the rest of this is. Yeah, I don't care about that. So we'll close that one. And we'll get to the queries when we get there. Oh man, don't tell me I lost that. Paste. Okay, it's still there. We'll get to the queries when we get to them, but the other page shows you really good queries and how simple they are. And that's what this is. It's just basic queries. It uses link syntax, or at least you can. I'm not sure if I always do, but I don't know if it has another option. But for an example, the loading is very simple. The filtering is very simple. I was going to show this once we get to this part. So I'll go ahead and minimize it. Just show you how simple it is. Okay, so that is now our, let's rebuild, make sure we're having errors. And another thing too, I found out by mistake, is that you want to make sure that everything in your project is updated. When I ran it, I was getting some weird errors. See, it says updates already. Oh, that's just a Redgate thing. I don't care about that. All right. So Redgate is just a tool that helps with database stuff. It's been around for, well, as far as I can remember. It used to be separate, and now part of it's part of Visual Studio. So, lost train of thought. Where are we? Oh, so now when you create our model, one thing that's really cool is you want to go back to your package manager, but what I'm going to do is open up a notepad. Okay, here's our notes. And I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't have closed that screen too fast, but if you look, you run this right here to create your model, which is really cool, the scaffolding. If you notice the DB contents, right, that's kind of generic for Entity Framework. Your data source, in this case, it's my local database. We use an AdventureWorks. My password, take a snapshot. I'm just kidding, it's my local, so it doesn't matter. One of the things that, oh, and you tell it what you're using, so we're using SQL. The one thing I like is you can put the output folders, okay? So in this case, I want everything here. You can also, if I wanted a certain table, I could also do that and then say the table name, and then it would only output certain tables. That's pretty cool if you only need a few tables, not everything. And then this F is for force. I don't know if you really need it, but I use it. Why not force it, right? Be aggressive. All right, so if we just copy this over here, again, you're using your just your package manager. At the end of the day, that's just PowerShell, right? But go. In this case, it's the NuGet package manager. But let this run. You get a lot of these cautions when you run this, which is fine if you go back and read them. I'm not going to spend time to read all of them. But one thing in your database, if you don't have primary keys or for it to link up to, or like IDs and stuff, then it won't bring it over. See, the columns and the primary key cannot be scaffolded. But it brought back everything I wanted. So now if I look at my project, it created the model for me. Okay, so if we go, we're probably going to focus on products first. So if I look there, it created my entities for me, right? Which is really cool. It also even created the relationships. So that's really cool too. So now if you go up, the most important thing it creates is your contents. And again, if you're used to working with Entity Framework, then you're used to seeing this. This DB set, right, that was, that's been an Entity Framework for as long as I can remember. But anyway, so it kind of just created everything for you, hence that's what scaffolding does. All right, so we're done with that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create another class. Excuse me. So we're going to start with products. So we'll call this one product repository. That way when we reference it, we know what it is. Okay, fair enough. Bam. Oh, I made that an interface. I don't think it matters. Or did I? Ooh. You know, it doesn't matter. Interface, we just say I. It's fine. So first thing we just make it public. Actually, I didn't make an interface because the default, well, I don't think who cares. If you want to make an interface, put an I and you're good. So what we need to do first is we want to create a public list. Products. Oh, well, we have I'll spell it right? Product. There we go. That's what it is. And actually, I'm sorry. That is right. And what you do basically, this would be a get all. So when you think of an API layer, What you really want to think about is your CRUD functionality, right? Does not have to be, but that's what I like to do. And a lot of times the reason I'm thinking interface is I do like to have an interface. So there'd be a get, there'd be a post, there'd be a put, oops, delete, you know, so forth, so forth. But in this case, we're going to start with a get all. There's a get. In most cases, it would just be get, and then you would pass it. And you'll see that when we do the API. But in my repository, I like to define it a little bit better because we may get it by description or get it by ID. Right? So there's going to be different gets. So what we need to do now is create a using. And the reason I like to use a using, you don't have to use a using. But the reason I like to use a using is because it will clean up, well, like it says, dispose. It will clean up the connection for you automatically. Since this is using Unity Framework, I'll use the word contents here. And then we just need to reference our this guy. Okay. No, that didn't work. Sorry, if you haven't noticed, I've also paused this a couple of times. I'm also working. So we're trying to throw together a quick website while working. All right, so new AdventureWorks contents. Just need to close this off. There we go. And now we're good. So now we have a reference to our contents, which was created by scaffolding inside of our entity framework. So now we can do something as simple as this. Return contents dot products dot to list, because I'm going to turn this as a list, and we're done. It's really that simple. And that was the other reason I was showing you this page. If I bring this over, it really is that simple. As you see here, it's referencing the contents, which was created by Unity Framework, and that's all you really have to do. So Unity Framework's handling all the load for you, all the work for you. This is if I want to do a single, if you've ever used link, which I do very often, you just do a single and do a link command. You can also do filtering, the where clause, and all that cool stuff. So that's pretty cool. So we're done with that page. So we need to test this. Now, this is not really best practice on the planet, right? But if we look at our solution, if we create it, I'm old school, been doing this for years. I like to still create a test harness, mainly for C++. Now, you do have the whole concept of building your test case and, you know, test data management. I mean, not test data management, sorry, I got the fresh in my brain, but to build a test first in your code and then test against it. But like I said, I'm old school. We'll delete this when we're done. So I'm going to create a test harness. Okay. And this won't take but a second. And the other thing too is it also gives you the ability to see how simple this is. So in my test harness, I'm just going to do a command line tool. We're going to call this test here. Okay, and test harness. Okay. And then inside my test harness, we're going to have a method of private static void get products. Okay. Oops, that was way wrong, wasn't it? I need to jump you on my keyboard. My spacebar on this keyboard really stinks. Here we're just going to say get products. Okay. And then what I need to do is reference my DAL. It's pretty simple. It's the only thing there. Check. Go. I didn't look at my version, but I think I'm okay. If not, it will yell at me if I don't. So here, all we need to do is get our repository. I had to look at what I called it. So we'll do it old school. We'll just make a reference to it. So product repository PR, very bad name convention. You know what? Let's don't do that because I hate that. Product repos. Product repo. How's that? Works. Equals new. Okay, so we're gonna new it up, and here we can say product report dot get all. Now, what I like to do for fun is var stop here, just so I have a breakpoint. Okay, put one there, and we'll put one there. We'll set this as my startup project. And if this works, we'll get it going, then we'll take a break, then we'll come back and build the others because I've got to get on a call here in a few minutes. So, all right, so we're going to jump through that. All right, so this is pretty funny. I got this error before, and it's because you got to run an update, which is kind of weird. That's why I said you want to make sure your projects are updated. So let's look at that. Tools and updates. It's not that one, but we'll go ahead and run this update. I'm going to stop because it's going to make me restart, and then I'll come back and do it again. But basically it's telling you that it's missing that, but it's not missing that. It's kind of weird how that works. So if you look at the error message again, we'll debug it because that kind of helps. And it's kind of weird because I've built these applications over and over and over, and I'm just not getting this error. And somebody watching this video may say, hey, you dummy, it's because of this. But realistically, I got it to work this way, and who cares? So here, if I try to install it, okay, it tells me it already exists. So if we go look at our, come on, you should not have to do your entity framework at this level because it's only dealing with a list, right? So, and it's kind of odd because it's only when I was doing the command line app that I got this error. So, okay, sorry, I stopped the video for 2 seconds because, like I said, I got to get on a call, but it was bugging me that this wouldn't work. So the problem is, I'll show you how to fix that real quick if you ever come across that. It can be kind of cumbersome, but what I did was I went ahead and ran. I'm using version 4.0 of this, and that causes a problem. So I forced it to be a 4.1. Now, when you build, that caused a problem. So I had to reinstall this Entity Framework SQL and the tools, and then that worked. So if you do run into that problem, when you installed this, it defaulted to 4.0. You want to force it to at least 4.1, because if you read the error message, that's what it was saying. And so then I just reinstalled these two, and it worked. So let's run it real quick. So now it just made a reference to our repository. So now it's going to get all the data for us, all the products. And that should have brought back all my products as a list. Do I not have a reference to it? Well, oh, let's try this again. Sorry. I got to give it something, right? There we go. So now let's try it again. Okay. All right, so there we go. So now we've got it. So in essence, what happened is very simple. Is if you go back and look at our repository, over here, oops, what just happened? No biggie. The only thing we're doing is we did a reference to our contents, which was created by Entity Framework, and then we just said we want our products on a list, right? So if I wanted to do a filter in that, instead of doing a list, I could easily do .single, right? Single or default, and put a query in there. ID equals I don't know the data. Okay. So I mean, there's a lot of things you can do in there. We can do a filter as well. You can do a where clause, but in this case, I just wanted everything back. So we'll go back and do the rest after my meetings, because the next thing we need to do, like we'll put one where we can bring back a lot of data. We put one where we can do a filter in the data, and that's going to be the biggest thing. And I'm going to base that around the views. Okay. So right now, all the products, and then because what happens is if we want the products, we're going to put them in the list page. Then we can modify them, right, and write back to it. Because what we want is TDM be able to populate some of this data for us and these pages. So the next phase, I got like 2 minutes. We'll go ahead and add this real quick, and then I'll drop this meeting and we'll come back to it. Bikeshop.api, okay. And we're going to create a simple API project for this. I want to Since we're using Windows, Microsoft C#, we'll just do the ASP one. Okay. And here, I just want this to be API. Okay. And keep other naming conventions to API. And this is pretty funny. You can't do that with a web. Okay, so where did we leave off? In case you all haven't noticed by my time jump that obviously I had a break to do a lot of meetings today. Now, what I was saying is, since I have my name up here, bike shop dot, where'd it go? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even put it up there. Oh yeah, I did, API. Since this is a .api, I can't do a website with .api, so we're gonna go rename this one. To be honest with you, I had to look at the video to see where we left off. So if we do just an underscore here, we should be okay. Now I can go and say add. We'll go ahead and add a new project. We're going to make it a web. So we'll call this one just UI and a photo code UI. Okay, and then here, well, I'm sorry, API, not UI. API. And our app is going to call bikeshop.api, just to be consistent with 4.7, and we're good. So when this little wizard comes up, what we want is the web API. We want an MVC, and everything else is good. And the rest of it's just default. Right. And that will create us our basic API website. And while that's loading, so if we looked, what that created was, it looks like a web page. In fact, it acts like a web page. The only difference is you really have this API area. So if I run this, let's set it as the default startup. So if I run this project, you'll see that, yeah, I like keeping the UI there, the web UI, even though we'll never use it because we'll create another one for the UI. But having it there in case I ever do need it. Let's make sure it loads just fine. Where'd it go? Try it again. Maybe I accidentally closed it. I don't know why you care about that. Okay, there we go. So this is your basic ASP web, right? If you did just an MVC web app, but it does have a section for APIs. Now, I don't have any APIs yet. This is just giving you the demos of what's there, right? The get, the post, and the put. So we're going to go back and create those here shortly. Let's look see what we got. So you got your areas, which is basically like a help page. The controllers, if you don't know what an MVC controller is, then I recommend looking that up. The idea with the MVC controller is you have a view, the model. In this case, our model is going to be our data access layer. And then you have your controller, which controls between the model and the view. Okay. Now, with this, we're going to come back and create some controllers, some API controllers to interact with the data access layer that will produce the data as JSON files. And then our UI will pick up that JSON and display it however we want to. Okay, I'm not too concerned about displaying because we're just trying to build a simple application that we can use for a demo. Okay, so now let's go start creating some APIs. All right, so the first thing we do is right click on our controller. The good thing about using the Windows ASP, the API web app to help you is that it truly helps you. Okay, so you get this little wizard here, which is going to generate some data for us. Now, we could just do an empty MVC controller. That would be if we was doing another web page, right? But we want an API. We could use Entity Framework because we did use Entity Framework, but that means any framework would have to be in this project, and we don't want it that way because it's going to ask me where it is. So what I prefer to do is just use this one that has to create read and write actions. So we're going to say add. This is product, if you remember, and hit add. Now, voila. So we're going to have to come back and dress this up a little bit, but right now it already put some code in here for us for get I. The truth is the get would be everything, what we put in our backend, so we'll go do that in a few seconds. Right now, let's just test it and to see if our API is showing up the way we expect it to. Okay, so then we'll go under API. We should see the default one, and here's our product. So, and here's our stuff. So just for kicks and giggles, just so you can see, we'll go back over here, and I'll put a breakpoint right here. And then if I say get, well, it should have broke, but maybe it's because it's already running. But the point is, that is that code, if I can put it in the right spot. Anyway, so now we'll go back and clean this up and add the other pieces that we need to. Okay, so we're going to think about our API. There's a couple ways we could do this. Now, you could create an action result to have this produce JSON, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do strictly APIs, okay? But the one thing I don't want is, I don't know if I want it to be a string as my return, so we'll get to that in a second. But the one thing I do want it to do is to do to allow HTTP post. So we need to add that in there. We definitely need to add the ability to get our data. Let's at least start there. And I think what I'd like to do is just have it directly, and I'll delete this once we get there. I'm just keeping it short and sweet, right? So if I go back to here, okay, and of course it's going to complain about that because we have to go add the reference, which is fine. And we only want the DAL. Okay, and that should resolve that. What I don't want, though, is it to be called temp. So we'll call it products. Okay. Oops, I was trying to say it saw that I wanted products, so I was trying to hit enter, but it didn't work. Now, how do we want to return this? So we've got to think about that. Like I said, you know, yeah, let's think. Okay, so I think for test purposes, why don't we just do this? So we have a list of products. Why don't we just return them? And let the API handle everything else. This has to be products. Products. Did I spell it? Okay, sometimes I accidentally hit the escape button. The escape button gets me out of the recording, and it's not really what I was trying to do. Okay, so that gets me product. And that should be good enough. Let's test it. Okay, so there's the product. Here's the values. I'll click on the values. So it did not like something in our overstack. So we'll have to look at that. But what we can do, at least we know it was executing. So it may be like so. We may have to parse it. Let's see what happens if we put a breakpoint there. Oh, I'm sorry. It's values, not product. And that's fine because we can, yeah, I don't think it likes the idea that we want it to be. So I may have to put some, I don't think it likes the idea that I'm trying to tell it that I want. Oops, I don't want to click there. Oh, pending changes, don't care. I'll do that in a second. But so if we go back and put this as a string, and I take all this out, and we return nothing, then that should work. Well, can't return nothing. Return a list of nothings. And go. Okay, and if we go back to our API, go here. Yeah, see, so now it works. So after my meeting, we'll go back and we'll fix that.